One of the things I think government buyers need to start paying closer attention to is how AI is going to change the economics of ERP. For a long time, ERP pricing has been complicated, but the categories were at least familiar. User licenses, modules, implementation services, hosting, maintenance, all those words that usually show up somewhere in the proposal or in the contract. Now, none of that was simple, but most agencies had a way to budget for it. And AI starts to change that. As ERP vendors add AI features into their platforms, you're going to see more pricing models tied to usage. Sometimes that usage will be described as tokens. Sometimes it will be credits. Sometimes it may be prompts, AI actions, document processing, or consumption-based pricing. The label matters less than the underlying issue, which is this: the cost may no longer be tied only to the number of users or the modules you've purchased. It may be tied to how often people use AI inside the system. And that can be useful, but it also creates a very different kind of risk for public sector buyers. I don't think token-based pricing is automatically bad. In some cases, it may actually be a fairer model than forcing an agency to buy broad access to users for users who barely touch the feature. The problem occurs when token-based or usage-based pricing gets introduced into a mission-critical ERP system without the right controls, reporting, and contract language around it. And ERP is not a side application. It touches finance, HR, payroll, procurement, budgeting, grants, utilities, work orders, your whole life, and a lot of the core operating functions of government. So when AI becomes part of these workflows, AI pricing is not just a technical detail. It becomes part of the operating cost of government. And that is where agencies need to slow down and understand what they're actually agreeing to. So what is a token? A token is basically a unit of text that an AI model processes. When you type a prompt into ChatGPT or Gemini, that uses tokens. When the system generates a response, that uses tokens. If the AI reads a document, summarizes a contract, reviews an invoice, compares responses from vendors, or explains the budget variance, all of that can involve token usage. Now, you don't need to become a technical expert in tokenization to manage this risk, but you do need to understand that every time the AI reads something, writes something, summarizes something, creates a picture, or reasons across a large body of information, there may be a meter running somewhere in the background. Now, let's bring that into ERP. A vendor may introduce AI features that summarize invoices, review procurement documents, explain budget variances, do all sorts of stuff, or draft responses based on system data. Those capabilities may be valuable. Some of them may save real time. Some may reduce friction for staff. Some may help departments make better use of the information already sitting inside your legacy ERP. But every one of those use cases needs a pricing conversation, not just a feature conversation. And this matters in every enterprise environment, but it matters even more in government because public agencies, they budget differently. You have annual budget cycles, you have departments and cost centers, you have appropriations, you have procurement rules, you have audit expectations, transparency requirements, councils, boards, commissions, taxpayers who may reasonably ask why a technology cost has changed or why it keeps going up. So if AI usage charges are sitting inside the ERP system, the agency needs to know how that costs behave over time. Who is allowed to use the AI feature? Who approves access? Who owns the budget? Can usage be capped by department? Can the feature be turned off by role? Who gets notified before costs exceed a threshold? Can finance see usage by department or workflow? Can the agency audit the vendor's usage data? These are not minor questions. These are governance questions. And the tricky part with AI is that success can create the cost problem. If nobody uses the AI feature, the cost may stay low. But if that feature is useful and adoption spreads across departments, the cost may grow quickly. That does not necessarily mean that the tool failed. It may mean the tool worked. But if the agency did not plan for that usage, now success has become a budget issue. So if I were evaluating an ERP contract that included AI usage pricing, I would build a simple model before signing anything. First, I would not start with the vendor's summary number. I would break it down by workflow. For each AI feature, I would ask who is going to use this, how often will they use it, what kind of information is being processed, how is usage being measured, what could this cost in a normal month, what could it cost in a heavy month, which department owns the cost, and what contract control do we need. Take invoice summaries as example. If accounts payable processes 2,000 invoices a month, the agency needs to understand whether the AI cost is tied to the invoice, the page count, the number of tokens, the number of summaries, or some other unit. Let's take procurement for document review. That can be a very different cost profile. Procurement documents can be long. You may be dealing with an RFP, vendor responses, addendums, evaluation notes, insurance. That's a lot of text than a simple prompt. For HR, if only HR staff use it, that is one thing. But if every employee in the organization can use it, that is a completely different usage pattern. So I would not model AI costs as one generic ERP add-on. I would model it by feature, department, workflow, user group, because that is where the cost is actually going to show up. So there are a few phrases I would listen to very carefully or listen for in vendor conversations. The first is AI is included. Now, that sounds great, but the follow-up should be included up to what limit? What features are included? Which users are included? Is it included for the full contract term or only during an intro period? Is it included in the test environment and sandbox or only in production? Included does not always mean unlimited. The second phrase is it is consumption-based. Now, that may be fine, but then the question is, who controls the consumption? Can the agency tap it? Can departments be assigned limits? Can the feature be disabled by role? Can the agency get alerts before overages occur? Consumption-based pricing without controls is not flexibility, it's exposure. And the third phrase is you only pay for what you use. That sounds great, very buyer-friendly. But someone still has to define what counts as use. If AI is embedded into a workflow, users may not even realize they're triggering billable events. The system may automatically summarize something, classify something, draft something, or recommend something in the background. From the user's perspective, it may just feel like the system is helping, and it is. But the finance department's perspective, it may be usage. It's dollars and cents. The fourth phrase is the model will improve over time. And I love this one because that may be true, but the agency needs to know whether the cost changes when the model changes. If the vendor moves to a more expensive model, introduces a premium tier, or changes how AI tasks are routed, does that affect pricing? Can the agency opt out? Is notice required? Is approval required? And finally, when a vendor says we provide usage analytics, the agency needs to ask what level of analytics they actually provide. A dashboard that says the agency used 10 million tokens is not enough. Finance needs to understand what drove the cost. Was it HR, procurement, budget, public works, a specific feature, a workflow, a group of users? Without that detail, the usage report is not very useful. So before signing a contract with AI usage pricing, and it's there, it's coming, if not already out there, I would want clear answers to several questions. What exactly is metered? Are input and output tokens both billed? Are document uploads billed differently? Are background automations billed? Are API calls separate? Can usage be capped by department? Can AI features be disabled by role? Who receives alerts before overages occur? I would also want to know whether pricing is locked for the full contract term. And what happens if the vendor changes the underlying AI model? Whether the agency can audit usage logs, whether sandbox or test usage is billed, and whether prompts, outputs, or uploaded documents are used for model training. It might seem like mumbo jumbo, but it's going to be standard in requirements and contract documents going forward. And if costs spike, I would want to know what the exit path is. Can the agency move to a fixed tier? Can it disable certain features without a penalty? Can it renegotiate the pricing structure if adoption exceeds a threshold? If the vendor cannot answer these questions clearly, that does not automatically mean that the product is bad. It means that the pricing model is not mature enough for your agency to accept without more protection. So there are a few things I would want to see in a contract. First, usage caps. Not a general statement that the vendor will monitor usage, but actual caps that the agency can configure and manage. Second, alerts before overages, not after the bill has already increased. Third, department-level reporting, because if finance, HR, procurement, and public works are all using AI differently, the agency needs to see that usage separately. Fourth, role-based enablement. So AI features can be turned on for the right users and turned off where they're not needed. Fifth, price protection, especially if the vendor changes models or introduces new AI tiers during the contract term. Sixth, audit rights. If the agency is being billed based on usage, it needs the right to validate usage. 7, data use restrictions, prompts, outputs, uploaded documents, financial records, HR records, procurement, should not be used for model training unless the agency has explicitly agreed to that. And finally, I would want to negotiate a trigger. If usage crosses a certain threshold, the agencies should have the ability to revisit the pricing model instead of being trapped in a structure that no longer fits the way the system is being used. So imagine a mid-sized city that has AI features added to its ERP system. At first, finance uses invoice summaries. Procurement starts using AI to review vendor responses. HR turns on a policy assessment or assistant. Department heads start asking the system to explain budget variances. Public Works begins using AI to summarize work order notes. All of that will be very useful. People will love it. The vendors may point to adoption as a success, but then the bill starts changing. Finance asks procurement whether this was covered in the contract. Procurement asks IT who turned the features on. IT asks departments how much they're using it. Departments say they thought it was included. The vendor says it is included, but up to the base usage threshold. Now that is the problem. Not that the AI failed. The problem is that AI succeeded without cost governance. The agency allowed usage to spread before it had a clear model for ownership, reporting, caps, and accountability. So my view is not that agencies should reject token-based pricing. That would be too simplistic. There are cases where usage-based prices make sense. If only a small group of users get value from a feature, maybe that agency should not have licenses for everyone. If the feature increases or creates measurable value, it may be reasonable to pay based on usage. But in government ERP, the buyer needs visibility and control. The problem is when the vendor controls the model, the meter, the workflow, the reporting, and the pricing terms, and that puts too much leverage on one side of the table. And once AI becomes part of daily operations, it gets harder to remove. Staff is going to build habits around it. Departments will start depending on it. Workflows will begin to assume it's there all the time. And that is why the pricing model needs to be negotiated before the behavior becomes embedded. Token pricing is not just a technical detail. This is a financial and budget governance issue. If your ERP contract includes AI, you need to understand what is metered, who controls usage, who sees the bill, and what happens when adoption grows. Before accepting the AI addendum, before agreeing to the free pilot, and before turning on AI features across departments, build the cost model. Ask the boring questions. Put the controls in the contract. AI may create value, but it should not become a blank check.